Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for tuning in for another episode. I've had a lot of people reach out to me recently regarding where I'll be fishing in 2026. A lot of people leaving YouTube comments, a lot of social media, friends messaging me, a lot of family and friends reaching out. And I love the fact that so many people want to know where I'll be fishing in 2026 so that they can root and cheer me on. I think that's an amazing thing. It means a lot to me to have that support. And I wish I could sit here and say that there's a very clear-cut, obvious decision. In my opinion, there really isn't a great decision when you're fishing, and if you're not in the Bassmaster Elite Series or the Bass Pro Tour, you're in a position where, the three or four leagues to choose from are platforms to give you some exposure. They're platforms to potentially win some money. But the reality is none of them are a good place to actually make a living. They're generally stepping stones, which isn't a bad thing. It just means, though, you're in a position where it's not necessarily an easy decision to make. Uh, I think for an angler, every angler's in a different situation. If you were to take, 10 anglers and actually break down what it is that they do for their career, as well as any other jobs and professions that they might have, you'd be probably finding that 10 out of 10 people have very, very different situations. Some anglers are full-time touring pros that literally live on the road and go from location to location, and fishing is all they do. You've got other anglers that have 5 other jobs, and every little bit of time off that they can get, they take to go fish the tournaments, but their true careers are made in other professions. You have some anglers that do a little bit of everything, which is kind of what I consider myself, where I've got a lot of content creation, I've got a lot of sponsor requirements, I've got other businesses that I run that I'm part of. So there's just a lot of juggling with respect to what it is that I do to make a living. And from that standpoint, when you really evaluate the choices that we have of what league to choose from, I think it's important for each angler to look at all the leagues and say, how does that fit into my puzzle the best? Meaning the tournaments are like, each league is a piece, is a puzzle piece, and it just matters how it fits into each angler's family life, business life, just all of their personal branding. It's not the same for every angler. And it's interesting to me because I have seen a lot of anglers be pretty critical of the choices that some anglers make. Because right now you have seen a lot of anglers choosing different places to fish, whether it's from, one league. They're just jumping leagues. And the reality is that's because there's not truly a great place to be. From an angler's position, there's not a ton of professional anglers that are making great careers in the sport. I'm not saying you can't do well. I'm just saying that, there's a lot of juggling around trying to find the circuit that fits their own personal brand the best. It's find that piece that fits their puzzle. And I think it's hard for one angler to criticize another angler if they don't fully understand the situation that those anglers are in. And in most cases, unless it's a good friend, you don't truly know what is kind of behind the scenes for each angler. And, for me, when I really break down those leagues, I think they're all very similar. I really do. Some have a little better payout, some have rules that you may like better, some have maybe more exposure, but they're all roughly the same. They're all a AAA circuit. And from that standpoint, you got to look at it and say, how is this going to benefit my personal brand or my business is the best? That's going to be different for every angler out there. It really will be. So for me, one of the first things I always do is I look at my sponsor portfolio. And at this point, my sponsors have been very, very supportive of me regardless of where I fish. So that kind of gives me some freedom. Some anglers don't have that. Some anglers are kind of given ultimatums as to, hey, we'll pay you this much, but you have to fish here. I don't really have that. I have the freedom and the support of my sponsors to go wherever I really want to be in terms of a fishing perspective. And then I look at it from a financial decision. And, if you're looking at some leagues pay a little bit better, some leagues don't pay that great, Some have much higher risk because the entry fees and expenses are more. Some have lower risk because they're less money to play. Ultimately, at this point in my career, I've paid a ton of money to fish. I think, when I started, it was $4,000 a tournament for the FLW tour, so it was $24,000 in tournament entry fees. At this point, that's gone all the way up to, fishing the Bass Pro Tour 2 years ago. I think it was like $45,000 I paid. If you want to fish the pro circuit or MPFL, you're looking at, $500 to $5,500 a tournament. I've paid that throughout my career. I'm not afraid to pay and fish high dollar tournaments, but I'm really not necessarily in a position where I'm going, what's the best avenue from a financial perspective? Because the reality is, if you win a tournament in any of those leagues, it's going to be a good year. If you don't win and you have a crummy year, you can lose a lot more in some leagues. You can kind of maintain, not a huge loss in other leagues. It really just comes down to how you fish. I've always been a check casher, which generally means if you have a good year cashing checks, you kind of cover your expenses and have a break-even year from an expense to tournament winning standpoint, which doesn't sound like much, but the reality is you're trying to gamble back your sponsor dollars. So with higher dollar tournaments, you can win your sponsor dollars back faster, but it also means if you have a bad year, it will be more risky. Again, at this point, finances aren't necessarily the thing that I'm concerned about, because the way I look at it is I generally cash in, 2/3 of the events, which means at the end of the year, you're going to be covering all your expenses regardless of where you fish. Whether it's the opens, you're just winning back smaller chunks, but you put down a lot less to play. If you're putting down $5,000 entry fees, winning $10,000 checks, you're still going to be covering your expenses by the end of the year. So to me, that's not a huge part of the equation. What is a big part of the equation is personal goals. I've done pretty much everything in the Major League Fishing side. I started with the FLW Tour in 2011. I don't know how many Forest Wood Cups I fished. I'm going to say 8 or 9. I don't know, something like that. The majority of the years that the FLW Tour was around. Fished a bunch of the Pro Circuit Championships. I fished Red Crest. I fished Heavy Hitters. I fished the team circuits. I've done pretty much everything on that side. The one tournament I haven't done that I truly want to do is the Bassmaster Classic. The only way to do that is you fish the Opens and win one, or you fish the Bassmaster Elites and you qualify. Either way, I got to go through the Bassmaster Opens. So for me, that's a huge part of the equation. The other huge part of the equation is schedule. And I'm not talking lakes. At this point in my career, I don't really care where we fish. Just tell me where you want me to show up. It has to do with dates. And when I put the schedule together, I have a lot of conflicts with the majority of the circuits, except for the Bassmaster Opens. So from that standpoint, if I look at which ones I don't have conflicts with family and business obligations and which ones I don't have conflicts, or which ones I do have conflicts, the Opens fall much more in line. So for me, the Opens are going to be the choice that I'm making in 2026. I've paid for the entry fees at this point, or deposits. Does not mean I won't fish other leagues in the future. I actually have asked several people to fish the dual threat fishing with me, and they turned me down. And you know who you are if you're watching this. So from that standpoint, I think that would be a blast. And the reason I actually would want to fish dual threat is the fact that I think it would be very entertaining to fish a high dollar team circuit. Like I started as a team fisherman, absolutely love the team environment. And I think it would be really fun to go to some of the different venues with a friend to do that. And maybe I will. Maybe that still happens. I could still jump in probably any of these, because the reality is I don't know that any of the circuits will be full by the start of the 2026 season. And that just kind of, again, goes to show that there are options for anglers to fish, but they're not necessarily such a great option that you're going to have anglers coming out of the woodwork to fish them, because they're just not that great of an investment. You know, if they're a decent investment if you're fully vested in the career of bass fishing, meaning they give you a platform, there's way to get exposure, you can win some money, you know, they give you a reason to, you know, go out and try to get sponsored dollars. Like, they're a part of the career, but they're not as important as they once were. They are losing some marketing value. And from that standpoint, you know, if you're not in one of those top two leagues, the options are really very dependent on each angler's personal obligations and business and brand that they need to choose from. And ultimately, you know, for me next year, the opens are the place that make the most sense. I want to fish a classic. Like, that's really what motivates me at this point. I want to go across that stage and have Hank and Duke and Sara watch me do it. They've seen me do everything else. I want them to be there. I want it for myself, but I just want to see them see me do it. Like, that's one of those things that as a dad, motivates me to do it. I also will point out too that with the way my personal brand runs, my fishing career runs, I do think that the Elite Series, if I could qualify for that, would set up very well for my personal situation. You know, there's a lot of exposure there to be had. There's still a lot of money to win. There is very little expense, honestly, from a tournament angler perspective. And I think that's a great place to be. And I want to try it. I've never done it. I really haven't devoted any part of my career to trying to make the Elite Series and the Classic. You know, last year I fished one division of the Opens, but I almost feel like I've got unfinished business just because we had such a crazy year of cancellations and weather that I almost feel like it was just kind of a dream. It doesn't even feel like it was a full season. So I kind of want another shot at it. I'll reevaluate for 2027, but that's where I'm at. The other thing I want to point out too that I thought was interesting, this is a little side note. So I did a poll at the start of the 2025 years to where people in YouTube wanted me to fish. And the four options were the Bassmaster Opens, NPFL, what were the Tackle Warehouse Pro Circuit or Invitationals, or to concentrate on YouTube. And at that point, about half the votes, which was I think like 1,000 or 1,200 votes, half of those said Bassmaster Opens. The other half were pretty evenly split between NPFL, the Pro Circuit, and just no tournaments, just do YouTube. I did the poll again like a month or so ago, had very similar results, except for the fact that there was one big swap. Half of the people out in YouTube world said they want me to fish NPFL. The other half was evenly split between the Bass Opens, the Pro Circuit, and just do YouTube. So there definitely has been some sort of flip-flop in the mindset, at least of the YouTube viewers, that, you know, they'd rather see me fish the Opens, which was half of those people, the voting last year, to doing the NPFL this year. And I thought that was interesting. I don't really, I know there's a lot of people that are really jumping on the NPFL train. And I understand some reason for that. It's not the right move for me, but I thought I would share that because I thought that was an interesting thing. Anyways, we're fishing the Opens next year. Maybe we'll jump in a few other tournaments. We'll see. But that's where we're at. So thanks for watching. Let me know in the comment section if you think I'm making a good decision or a bad decision. I'm sure you'll do that anyways. And I appreciate all of the support of those of you out there who will be rooting me on next year. So hopefully we can put some good bass in the boat and make it a good year.